The bus leaves you in a place that smells like wet hay and hot metal. The road behind you empties fast, wiping away proof you were ever here. Ahead, fences slice through the trees with unnatural precision. A single bulb flickers above a half-hidden door. A generator hums nearby, steady, mechanical, indifferent. Someone says your name, calmly, like it's already his. You search for a building, a sign, a reason. There's nothing, just barns swallowed by darkness and locks bolted on from the outside, as if escape was never part of the design. They registered it as a farm. Authorities called it a residence. Survivors used the word no one wanted to hear, breeding. Before we go further, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. And if this kind of buried history matters to you, consider liking and subscribing. It still stuns me how far these stories travel. America has always been good at remembering the loud horrors, the ones with headlines, the ones with a single villain you can point to and a single date you can place on a timeline. But there are other horrors, quiet, administrative, disguised as routine, that don't fit into neat narratives. They hide behind forms, behind county stamps, behind friendly names painted on roadside signs. They don't need barbed wire when distance and shame can do the job. They don't need guards when the paperwork itself tells the world, don't ask questions. This story is not a documentary record, and it doesn't pretend to be. It's a cinematic reconstruction of what survivors said it felt like, how it sounded, how it smelled, how it changed the shape of time. It takes place in an America that preached progress and cleanliness while keeping dark systems running in the margins. And the paradox that drives everything is simple and sickening. The people who built these breeding farms didn't see themselves as monsters. They saw themselves as managers. They spoke in the language of order. They believed they were solving problems. But the survivors said the same thing, again and again. It didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a business. Our first human anchor is a survivor mother. We'll call her Leela Hart. Leela is 19 when she disappears from her town, and no one calls it kidnapping. Not out loud. Her disappearance happens the way so many disappearances do in a country that trusts paper more than people. Through a program, a placement, a temporary stay. A social worker with a soft voice tells her this is for her own good. A judge signs something without looking up. A county car drives her past the last streetlight, past the last neighbor, past the last place where someone might hear her yell. She arrives at a property with a cheerful name, Green Meadow painted on a sign like a lie meant for tourists. The buildings look ordinary at first. Barns, a main house, a laundry shed. But then Lila notices the details that don't belong on ordinary farms. Windows painted shut, doors without handles on the inside, a bell system that rings not for meals but for movement. She is given a plain dress and a schedule. Her purse is stored, her shoes are cleaned. Her name is for the file. That first night she meets women who don't introduce themselves, not because they're cruel, but because introductions are a form of hope, and hope is expensive here. They sit on beds that are too narrow, under blankets that feel like borrowed fabric. They avoid eye contact the way people avoid storms by pretending it isn't coming. The first rule is delivered softly, like advice. Don't run, not you can't, not you'll be punished. Just don't. And that's the first curiosity spike. The first question that grabs the viewer by the collar. If this wasn't a prison, how did it hold anyone at all? The answer comes in layers, like paint over rot. Layer 1 is geography. Green Meadow sits far from town, off roads that don't get traffic, hidden behind tree lines that swallow sound. Even if you ran, where would you run to? And who would you ask for help when you arrived, wet, shaking, without papers? Layer 2 is paperwork. The farm has a file for every woman. Those files are its real walls, unfit, unstable, in need of care. Labels that make the outside world nod sympathetically, while the inside world tightens the grip. A woman who escapes isn't seen as a witness. She's seen as a problem returning to where she supposedly belongs. Layer 3 is reputation. The women are told over and over that no one will believe them, that they're lucky to be here, that the farm is saving them from something worse, that if they cause trouble, they'll be sent to an institution where the doors really do lock. Layer 4 is controlled deprivation. Enough food to keep bodies working, not enough comfort to let anyone feel human. Hunger and fatigue blur the line between days. Layer 5 is normalization, the deadliest layer of all. After a week, a schedule feels like structure. After a month, silence feels like safety. After a year, the idea of leaving feels like stepping off a cliff into a world you no longer understand. Green Meadow divides the women into categories written on a board in a back hallway. Not insults, not slurs. Neat words that make cruelty look official. Laundry, kitchen, nursery. And then a category that isn't always written, but is always understood. Breeding. The first time Lila hears the word, it doesn't register. It's said like a joke between staff, tossed into the air and caught again without weight. But then she sees the schedule board, names paired with dates, bath instructions, clothing instructions, notes like prep and rest. No one explains. Explanation would suggest consent matters. Instead, the farm uses the language of procedure. You're scheduled. Lila learns quickly that Green Meadow doesn't depend on constant violence. It depends on the threat of it. Punishments are often quiet, privileges removed, blankets taken during cold snaps, letters withheld, meals reduced, isolation used like a weapon, the kind of isolation that makes time feel like a liquid you're drowning in. Some women comply because compliance is survival. Some resist until the resistance drains out of them. And that's the second curiosity spike, sharper and darker, who signs off on something like this, who turns human lives into scheduled inventory. Lila hears names in fragments. A local doctor who visits monthly, not to heal, but to evaluate. He listens to hearts without meeting eyes. He writes notes with clean hands. A judge whose signature lives in the files like a ghost. Men who arrive at night through back doors, spoken of with euphemisms that make the staff feel respectable. Donors, guests, visitors. Green Meadow doesn't call anything what it is. It calls things by the names that keep them legal in conversation. It dresses itself in soft language the way a wolf hides behind tall grass. Months pass, Lila becomes a shadow with chores. Then she becomes something else, a mother. The pregnancy isn't described on the farm as a tragedy or a crime. It's described as successful. A staff member marks the date on a calendar as if it's a harvest. Lila feels the baby move and realizes her body has become a site of conflict that no one outside will ever see. When the child is born, there is no celebration. There is a scale. There is a ledger. There is a note. Healthy. The baby is Jonah. Our second human anchor is the child raised on the farm. Jonah grows up in the nursery wing with other children, and the nursery wing is the most unsettling part of Green Meadow because it almost resembles care. Toys exist, cribs exist, songs exist, but the songs stop when staff enter. The children are rotated between caregivers to prevent bonding. The word mom is discouraged, not by screaming, but by correction, so calm it feels like weather. Affection is rationed like food. Jonah's earliest memory is a sound, a lullaby humming through a vent. Then cut off mid-note by a sharp, practiced she. He learns that noise attracts punishment. He learns that questions make adults cold. He learns that names are dangerous. Birthdays aren't celebrated because birthdays make you count, and counting makes you realize time is being stolen. At 6, Jonah is given chores. At 8, he is taught rules. At 10, he learns the difference between the children who are kept and the children who are placed. He doesn't understand what placement means at first. He imagines a new bed, a new room, maybe a real mother. Then he notices that the children who are placed leave without goodbye. Their clothes disappear from shelves. Their names disappear from the board. The staff speaks about them the way people speak about shipments. Some children are adopted out unofficially to couples who want a child without questions. Some are sent to households connected to the judge, the doctor, the quiet network that keeps Green Meadow protected. Some are kept as labor. And some, Jonah begins to suspect, are being groomed for something even darker. He starts noticing a locked wing he's never entered. A room where Martha Bell, the cook and record keeper, keeps files and never lets children near. Jonah likes Martha more than he should, because she sometimes slips him an extra biscuit. She sometimes calls him honey without meaning anything by it. She sometimes looks sad in the way people look sad when they've made a life inside a wrong thing and don't know how to leave. Martha tells herself she's not a villain. She tells herself she's feeding people. She tells herself she's keeping order. She tells herself she didn't write the laws, didn't build the system, didn't choose the world, but she keeps the ledgers. And one afternoon, Jonah finds one. A ledger page left open on a desk, names and codes, notes and margins, lines connecting entries like a family tree, drawn by someone who doesn't believe families are real. Jonah doesn't know what every code means, but he understands the feeling of it. It's not a record of people, it's a record of assets. He feels something inside him twist, not into rage, but into clarity. That's the third curiosity spike, the one that changes the entire story's scale. If the farm tracks bloodlines, what is it planning for the children who grow up inside it? Jonah begins watching adults the way prey watches predators. He notices how staff look at him now that his shoulders widen. He hears conversations in hallways, good build, steady temperament, useful. Useful is the word that never means what it should. One night, Jonah sees a boy older than him taken into the locked wing. The boy returns hours later with his eyes empty, moving like someone who has left part of himself in a room he can't describe. No bruises, no visible damage, just a new quiet, a deeper quiet. Jonah understands the farm's true power. It knows how to do harm without leaving the kinds of marks that outsiders recognize. And then Jonah finds something else, tucked behind the ledgers, like a guilty conscience. Letters, not mailed, not received, just written. Stacks of paper with different handwriting, different tones, some angry, some pleading, some strangely calm. Women writing to nobody, writing to themselves, writing to a future they aren't sure exists. He recognizes Leela's handwriting. He reads her letter like someone drinking water after years of thirst. It isn't poetry. It isn't a confession. It's a map of survival. Loose boards near the creek fence. Shift changes. The generator hiccup at midnight. The dog's feeding time. And at the bottom, one sentence that lands heavier than the whole page. If you ever get out, don't let them turn your silence into their innocence. Jonah's heart pounds with something unfamiliar. Not hope. Hope is dangerous. This is more like stubbornness, a refusal to be sorted. He tells Leela they speak in the laundry room where machines thump like giant hearts. Leela's face doesn't crumple. It hardens into focus. For years, she has survived by shrinking her expectations to fit the farm's walls. Now, her expectations expand like something waking up. We can't take everyone, Jonah whispers. Lila closes her eyes, and in that moment, you see what the farm really stole from her. Not just freedom, but impossible choices. They plan anyway, not for a hero's escape, but for a narrow one. A theft of minutes. A run timed to rain, because rain erases footprints and muffles sound. The night comes, the sky opens. Mud turns the yard into a trap. The generator hum wavers. Jonah moves through hallways he has walked 1,000 times, every board memorized, every corner known. Lila waits near the nursery wing with a bundle of blankets, pretending it's chores. And then the moral contradiction appears, razor sharp. Leaving means abandoning children who will wake up tomorrow still inside the machine. Jonah chooses one child to bring Nisa, small enough to carry, feverish enough that leaving her feels like sentencing. He doesn't know why he chooses her, beyond the unbearable fact that her hand fits into his like trust. They slip down the service corridor, past the laundry shed, toward the creek fence. Jonah pries the loose board up. Rain slaps their faces. The dog barks once, then stops, confused. They squeeze through. For a breath, it feels like they did it. Freedom should feel like sunrise. Instead, it feels like holding your breath underwater. A flashlight beam cuts through rain. A voice calls Leela's real name, proof the farm always knew it. Proof the file was never lost. Proof the paperwork was the cage. Martha stands on the porch with the flashlight. She looks almost sad. "Don't," Martha says, like she's begging someone not to break a plate. Lila turns back, and Jonah expects her to plead. Instead, she speaks with a calm that sounds like the end of fear. "You wrote it down," she says, "all of it, like it was nothing." Martha's mouth tightens. "I didn't make the rules." Lila takes one step closer to the gap in the fence. "You kept them." That line hangs in the rain like a verdict. Jonah pulls her arm, and they run not far, not fast, but desperate. The woods swallow them. The road catches them. The night becomes a tunnel with no guarantee of exit. A truck slows. The driver sees 3 soaked figures and hesitates. Jonah thinks, this is where America looks away. This is where the outside world rejects what it doesn't understand. Then the passenger door opens. "Get in," the driver says. Sometimes survival is decided by a stranger choosing to see. After that, the story fractures into the quieter battle survivors rarely get credit for. The aftermath, police ask questions that sound like suspicion. Social workers offer blankets and disbelief in the same breath. Green Meadow denies everything. The judge's name appears in files. The doctor's visits are explained away. Martha says she was only the cook, only the record keeper, only the person who kept the system fed and documented. The farm's genius shows itself one last time. It was designed to leave no simple evidence, no cinematic scars, only patterns: missing girls, silent children, sealed files, and a community that learned not to stare too long. But one artifact survives. A ledger book, water-damaged at the edges, rescued from a burn pile behind the main house when someone finally decided paper mattered more than reputation. The ink runs, but the structure remains. Codes, dates, notes, transactions. A business, written in handwriting. And in the margins, a small detail that chills even hardened investigators on certain pages. The word stock is crossed out and replaced with youth. Not because the meaning changed, because the language did. Years later, Jonah sits under fluorescent lights and tries to describe Green Meadow to someone who has never lived inside an administrative nightmare. He has a job now. He has an address. He has a name that belongs to him. But certain words still snag his throat. Schedule, door, quiet. He says the hardest part wasn't the fence. It was the way your mind learns to cooperate with the cage, because cooperation hurts less than resistance. It was the way you start measuring your own worth by how little trouble you cause. Lila keeps a small box in her closet. Inside are objects that should be meaningless: a button from a nursery gown, a torn scrap of her own letter, a rusted nail from a window frame. Not trophies, proof. Because trauma does something cruel. It makes survivors doubt their reality. And doubt is how systems like Green Meadow survive, even after they're gone. They remembered, they recorded, they whispered it into letters no one was supposed to read. They could not look away forever. And that's the final image to leave you with. Not a courtroom victory, not a dramatic fire, not a neat ending. A road at night, rain on the windshield. A truck driver gripping the wheel, glancing in the rearview mirror at a mother and two children who won't stop shaking. Behind them, far back in the dark, a single porch light still glows over a door that will open tomorrow morning like nothing happened. Because the most haunting thing about America's forgotten horrors isn't that they existed. It's that for a long time, they could exist quietly disguised as care, protected by paperwork, and built from the cheapest material a nation can offer its conscience: silence.